Fun.
Hi, how are you guys doing today? We're here to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that I think we all face when we're coming, going to meet family, whether it's for a holiday or for a get together, and some of the baggage and some of the challenges that we have in that. So I know Lauren's been talking about that with us as we get ready for the holidays, and I'm just wondering, Lauren, what kind of things have been coming to mind for you?
Well, what's coming to mind is family can be really, really difficult. And, your friends, you can kind of choose to hang out with your friends during the holiday, have a holiday party that you host and you're in control of. But when you're going to a family member's house, sometimes it can feel really scary and out of control because you don't have a lot of choices and you have the whole history on what people have acted like over the years.
Now, I know you've mentioned your uncle being one of those people. Can you kind of describe what is it about that relationship that makes it kind of tough?
Yeah, growing up, I remember him as a guy rough around the edges. He's kind of big and bulky and intimidating in the way he looks, like he's an army guy. And I remember him telling really like off-color jokes, and a lot of those jokes would be sexist. And I remember even young, like feeling so uncomfortable with that and in a way, like really feeling offended by that and hurt by that. And the way that my extended family handled it was to simply just laugh and blow it off. And he just continued to do it because nobody called him out.
So it sounds like you've had this experience where you know it doesn't feel right and it feels somewhat offensive because it's sexist or has some off color to it. And yet everybody around you is just kind of letting it go.
Mm-hmm.
And now that as you have gotten older and you're kind of processing through that, what are some of the things that come to mind on how you would maybe address that differently?
Yeah, I actually had the opportunity to address it because I saw him recently, but I'm in a very different place. And I thought it doesn't work for me anymore to just laugh or go along or just sit there in silence when really I think it's really. Hi, Sam. um, I couldn't just go along with it anymore in my own growth. Um, so in my mind, I was using prediction of this situation is going to happen again. And then in my mind, I would play out, so what could I do? And I imagined myself like stomping off. And then I thought, no, that actually doesn't feel authentic or aligned because I'm not addressing the real problem. So I played out in my mind a new scenario on how I wanted to handle it, which would be to actually just say, I deserve to be treated with respect in this space. And if you can't do that, I'm going to get up and leave.
Now I can imagine kind of making that change might be kind of scary. And because it's new and it's sort of putting your voice forward, how do you address that?
Yeah, I knew that it was going to take a lot of courage because, like I said, in my family history, everybody kind of just knows how to act if he was going to tell one of those jokes. And I thought, I'm going to try it anyways because maybe my parents are going to be offended, but I'm still honoring myself and what I feel is safe and kind. And maybe my uncle was going to be offended, but I thought, I'm going to do it anyways. I gave myself permission.
And oftentimes, when we're predicting, it feels like we're thinking the worst. And so part of it is sort of planning for that, even though the chance of that may actually be pretty small, right? So, how do you decide what you're going to plan for and what you're not going to plan for in those kinds of settings?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I decided based on how nervous I felt. I
Mm.
really, really was not looking forward to seeing him. And I thought this is an act of self care and self love to make a plan on how to honor where I'm at
So,
and honor that respect.
yeah, so part of it is as we're getting into the season and trying to meet with family and even with friends, if there's that person that maybe you're a little uncomfortable, you got some anxiety about seeing them, it might be a good indicator that there's something there that you want to kind of plan for.
Hmm.
And so, how would you help somebody kind of plan for that? What are kind of some of the steps that come to mind in planning for that?
Yeah. I would say, first of all, recognize what your prediction is, like what has happened in the past and where your mind is using that information to predict, like worst case scenario. And then come up with some clear ways that you could keep yourself safe and that you could address it that feels really authentic and aligned for you, even if that is outside of the family norm. I also, when I went to see my uncle, put a physical boundary there. I decided I don't need to shake his hand. I don't need to give him a hug. I can be kind, but I don't need that like physical connection, which just reminded me I'm also putting an internal boundary up of not being talked to in a disrespectful way.
So matching the external boundary and the internal boundary for you is really important in terms of feeling like I'm having a voice. I'm bringing my best self forward,
Mm-hmm.
and but still being kind in that, and still being authentic, and still being honest and true to yourself. And how did that go?
Actually, I discovered something really amazing is that I could enjoy the time that I had with my uncle. A big thing that we do in my family is play cards. So you're sitting around looking at people in pretty close proximity. And I found myself really enjoying him as a person and enjoying the time that we had together. And I think a big part of that was because I wasn't on the defensive. I wasn't putting all my energy into trying to stay safe because I already had a permission and a plan on what I could do, what was in my control.
So part of the planning process is giving yourself permission.
Mhm.
And I think as we think about the scenarios when we're with family, that can be really hard, really challenging. And, we get nervous about it. We almost want to avoid it as much as we can. But having a plan, giving ourselves permission to say, I'm worth making a stand and have
Mhm.
a voice for myself. Now that doesn't mean we have to be unkind. We can still be very kind and gentle with people, but giving ourselves those permissions is really an act of honoring ourselves. And actually it's an act of honoring the other person by allowing them to be who they are and not allowing that to cross your boundary, cross
Mhm.
who you are. And I think those are things that sort of come to mind very very quickly as I think about that. And I think about times with my own family, with especially with my brother, who I struggle with in a lot of ways. And oftentimes when he calls, he's calling about money or wanting something, and so really trying to understand where that boundary is with him, and how can I continue to love him as my brother, but not necessarily feed into that need of having to that pull really of I gotta help, I gotta fix, and he can be on his journey, I can be on my journey, and it's okay.
Mhm. And to give you guys one visual, I was thinking of the idea of don't take the bait. And I was picturing this fish, hanging off a fishing line, um, guy in the boat, and that fish is pretty much helpless. I mean, he thought he was grabbing onto something good, but in the long run, he lost his empowerment. And it's totally up to the fisherman if he's going to do catch and release or, what the outcome's going to be. And I think that's like when we're with a family member or a friend that like stirs things up inside of us, we can often like take the bait and go, I'm going for this argument, or, I can't handle it. I just have to like run out of the house. But there's something that happens where we're like hooked in and we take that bait and we have a choice on that. So to me, that would be the encouragement is don't take the bait, stay swimming in your own space and do what you can to take care of yourself.
Well, I think that's something we can all take away, right? We all face these kinds of relationships in our lives with family, with friends. And as you think about the holidays coming around, just think about some of those relationships that maybe are creating some anxiety, and think about how you can plan for those times together. We hope this has been helpful. We're here to help, and we're looking forward to seeing you guys soon. So hopefully this has been helpful. And if you're interested in learning more, click below and we'll get you into our next course that will help you with some of these issues.